So today is 362 days from the next match, from the next national competition for Ultimate Hunter. I took a vacation from my goal. I took a grand total of 1 day off from preparing for this, the day after the last match. I'm going to build my channel around getting people to join competitions and getting to train and learn the value of training and competition, building camaraderie and community. Decentralized unity is more resilient. We all have agreed upon principles, ideologies, and skill sets, matching uniformity while also maintaining our individuality. These are going to be beneficial for any and all purposes in building your community. When it comes to shooting sports, I found that when I came back from Korea after COVID, that, can I say that word? I'm probably just going to get this one shut off like the last one I did. Building your community around, when I came back from Korea, shooting sports had died. They were gone. It was people about my age starting them back up and getting old guys to agree to go back out to them. I'm only 34. I'm older, but guys in their late 20s were going, where are all the shooting sports? I want to do shooting sports. And all the old guys had disappeared because they didn't want to go back out anymore. And the middle-aged guys had kind of gotten angry at the world. Shooting sports are important. They build your marksmanship fundamentals. They develop your unity of your standing militia. They develop your community and your sense of camaraderie of your teammates. And it's something I missed from leaving the United States, and something that during my 10 years of active service, 8 years of active duty service, that I was constantly moving around, and I never really developed a consistent community. I would develop a community for about a year and a half, and then I would move again. I'm finally somewhere where I get to do what most Americans get to do, which is know their community the whole time. I don't have to deploy or go somewhere else, which is great. It's also going to allow me to be much more competitive in a single sport. So I have picked to focus on, I will be doing all the other sports that I'm going to try to teach people about, but I decided to focus on Ultimate Hunter because it's a brand new upcoming sport I think people are going to really enjoy once they learn about it. So in bringing it to you, I'm going to show you my 1 year, short, 362-day track to competing in and winning Ultimate Hunter. That's my intention, is to take first place overall Ultimate Hunter in the 5 events. Rifle, pistol, 22, muzzleloader, and archery. And just to state how far behind I am from other actual hunters, true Ultimate Hunters, I haven't fired a bow since Boy Scouts, and I didn't do it habitually. It was for a badge. And I haven't ever owned a muzzleloader, except for my cowboy action replicas of 1860 and 1853 Army Navy pistols. So I am woefully unequipped to even compete in all 5 sports. So in this 1 year track, I'm going to make a series of videos going from being first place in pistol, irons, standard velocity, to being first place overall in all 5 events, with no substantive experience in 2 of the sports, placing poorly in 1 of the sports. So I think I'll do pretty well in 22 once. Oh, I'm also under equipped for that. I have a bolt action, and really to be competitive in that, I need a semi-auto. So you're going to follow me on equipment evaluations. You're going to follow me on the changes that I make to my setup, and how it's not going to be an equipment game. It's going to be a drilling game. We're going to drill thousands of times actions over and over and over. And so what I have to do to start, yesterday I prepared 400 pieces of brass of 6.5. Because the first thing I'm going to start really tackling is my knowledge and load development for wind deflection. And to fight that, I'm going to be using, for now, I'm looking at 140 grain ELDMs. And these will give me a superior ballistic coefficient, which will help resist the wind. Compared to the original 140 grain hollow point boat tails, they're only ever so slightly shorter, or the new ones are longer. But you'll notice that the rebate location, if we press them to match the tips, we're actually going to end up with a little bit more back pressure, which means higher pressure, potentially slightly higher velocities. Not very much, but something, right? So that'll help us a little bit. An extra 50 feet per second will count a little bit against that wind as well. The other thing I'm going to be looking at is 6-arc, and I've so far liked 6-arc except finding a load. So part of this video series is going to be getting a load developed. In order to get a 6-arc load developed, I have already been doing a lot of work learning about 6-arc and what it likes. And so far, my cousin and I decided on these two. 90 grain Sierra Game Changers, Ogden benchmark. Now, 90 grain sounds light, but we want it to be going fast so that we don't have too much drop. And in fact, we're going to have about 1.5 minutes less drop at 500 yards, which is good. And this is a target game, but we're also maintaining energy pretty well. And we're going to have wind deflection just a little less than what the calculator says this will do. Wind deflection should be about 1/3 of an MOA less. So even after developing this 6.5 and training with it, which it's still good practice and I'm going to work on it, I am going to be working on the 6-arc build. I'll probably be changing my barrel to 20 inches, and there will be more from what happens to my 16-inch barrel to come. But for my 6.5 for now, I'm going to work on that skill set. And I'm going to be looking for a muzzle loader and a bow and arrow set, which is very foreign to me. Because I've spent all my time on rifle, pistol, shotgun, and now I've got to do some weird things. So follow me along on this fun, but we're going to go ahead and load 20 rounds. We're starting to test this slight change in load. All we're really changing is we're going to change the primers. Primers are going to be Fiocchi. I have thousands of these. This 750 is part of one lot. This should be enough for the building for the season training and build-up. And I shouldn't have to change this for the competition because it will only take a few to get that ready. And then we will see. I have a whole other batch that I will just retest before game if I go to 6.5, but I'm also going to be testing the 6-arc, and we'll decide on that. You're also going to follow me on picking my bow and arrow, but let's go ahead and get started on reloading these things. So it is a, oh, I already pulled these out. Usually I like to start with 20 rounds for mistakes and everything. Some people are like, oh, you only need like 5 to know how it groups and then you can test velocity or whatever. I kind of already know velocity, except, I mean, it's going to change, but it's close enough that I'm not worried about it right this second. What I'm going to do is see grouping and then test what the actual ballistic wind deflection is and see if that actually is effective. Now remember, you want to make sure you press these in to be flush. See if we'll get it. You want to press these in to be flush, because if you do not, you will suffer the consequences of having light primer strikes by failure to fires, as my cousin found out recently with hand loading his primers. Even though he's hand loading them, he just was light pressing them, light squeezing. Squeeze it all the way down, get full length and stroke, right? I kind of find it ridiculous to myself to be saying, yeah, I'm going to go next year and I'm going to win it all, when I did okay on one event. One event. I didn't even take first overall in pistol by score. I took first overall in the hardest class, I would say, iron standard velocities, so a 9mm with iron sights. It's good, but people with 357 magnums and scopes were still not outclassing me in most cases. In fact, only one had that advantage, but above me. but I think I can do it. I have a lot more experience than I would normally give myself credit for in at least training. I may not be the best at these things, but I am trained in training. So I know how to build a plan. So I've been working out while I do all this reloading, while I do all this prep. When I'm sitting here staring at brass, what I am doing is thinking through my timeline and slowly building a calendar in my head, which will eventually go to paper, which is going to involve meso macro cycles. Oh, I only got 18, look at that. Miscounted. Off to a bad start. We're not even accurate in counting pieces of metal. So, but I have experience in training. The Army made me a trainer. The Army made me train a lot. College made me practice and learn. Cross country made me an athlete. I'm a fat athlete now. But I can do it. And I believe, so you're going to believe with me too. I'll make you a believer and get there. So we are going to beat Walt Pruitt. Walt is the father of the founder, Austin Pruitt, of Ultimate Hunter, but a highly experienced competitor, national firearms competitor. His son is an excellent marksman and competitor as well, possibly better than Walt, but he doesn't compete in the nationals, so I may win Ultimate Hunter, but maybe I'm not the best, and that's fine as long as I get the little placard. So, but for now, I think we can do it. So what I'm going to be doing with these, now the recipe, we're going to call it a recipe, the load data recipe from Ogden says 35.8 grains of Varget, which is what I loaded my 140 with before, with this specific projectile actually, these 140 grain ELDMs. But it also called for 210 match Federals. Now, I was using 210 non-match. I didn't find that they seemed to cause anything too dramatic that I could suss out, but these are going to let me know if there's a difference, because I have had good success at making 1 MOA groups with these Fiocchi primers. They're not the most consistent. They are not match primers. These are a budget primer, but I've had good success with them. So I'm thinking they'll be consistent enough to make a 1 MOA group with this, so I shouldn't have a severe issue changing out between one or the other. What I do know is that I need to keep everything in the same batch as I go. So when I change batches, I have to retest my load to confirm it all maintains the same velocities and same grouping. But again, I only need to make this last to the match, and I can train with other cartridges, reloadings, with slight variations, so long as I know and dope and train with these 750 for the final. So I only need 100 to go to the match, so I have 650 to train with. That's effectively my math with these. I have another several thousand to use for practice, so I can kind of just take the close enough ones and run those. But these are going to be my match ones if I run 6.5. That's if I run 6.5. So we will see how it goes. Oh, no, I did need that in. But I had a quick change on this. Forgot about that. I do not on my 6.5, because I don't really load it fast enough, since I spend all my time focusing on exactness. I do not need to have the quick changers. So I'm going to put in a bullet seating die. I'm not going to neck and crimp, because that would make it inconsistent. Instead, what I did is I pressed firmly into the neck expanding die that doesn't do full length sizing. This will get me relatively consistent neck tension, which is what I really care about. I did have, with this, I'm using Cellar and Bellet once fired brass. These have all been once fired now. I did have a couple. Some are slightly darker, and I think that they're from a different lot that I might have been a range pickup, or were from the ones that I first picked to test about 60 rounds of before I bought a box of 500, a half a case. And I think they just give me a slightly lighter loading, or sorry, a slightly wider body. They barely fit into the sizer. But I don't have problems chambering them. I haven't seen a consistency issue that throws me through a loop and goes, oh my God, what has happened? So I think we'll be okay. So you guys are going to go ahead and watch the boring part. You're going to follow me on these boring parts, because we're going to talk about what I'm doing. We'll learn lessons along the way. Tonight I'm drinking Princess Yum Yum. Princess Yum Yum. Denver Beer Co. It's good. It's a raspberry Kolsch. My wife likes it. Just tried it out. I like it too. So let's keep going. If you guys ever trained, go ahead and leave a comment for a specific event that you were not previously an expert at. Leave a comment if you ever thought you could win something and were pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised at how poorly you did. I've always been a very aggressive competitor and trainer, but somewhat inconsistent. And the inconsistency comes from some ADHD and some life expectations and timelines that just have caused me to be inconsistent in my personal training, where I focus on an event for, it can be years at a time, but I won't hold it my whole life. And I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that unless it's going to be your main bread and butter. In this case, I know I can stick with this for a year because I'm already shooting all the time. I'm already obsessive with it. Quite frankly, when I'm not shooting, I get a little sad. I don't know why I'm sad until I find out, oh, when I go shooting again, I go, oh, that's why I wasn't getting out there and putting a gun on range. So, this is going to be a big part of my life to focus on this specific thing, which is varied enough that I won't get bored either, which is good. Let's not do that. Let's not load direct. We're going to indirect for these, make sure we are good to go, that the measurements are fine. See, 35.9, sure enough, we're a little over. Again, these meters aren't necessarily fans of any type of long grain, and no matter how many times I adjust them, they seem to change slightly. Sad. 35.8. Where did that? Right, go. I've also been told dryer sheets, by the way, if you get static cling on these, dryer sheets are supposed to work. I haven't tried it yet. Probably should. Maybe next loading session, I'll have dryer sheets. Dryer sheets will help get rid of that static cling, supposedly, since they work specifically to do the same for your clothing. And this way, then you don't get powder getting stuck in these funnels. Now, the longer grains don't have that problem necessarily. They get bridging, but they don't usually stick unless it's highly static. But you do with the light powders, especially like pistol powders, these finer things. So, I'm gonna set projectiles onto the Nutellus. We are done. We're gonna set them upside down. Don't load them like that. It's gonna be dangerous. Some serious back pressure. Tighten that down slightly. Hopefully we don't go below. $36. Wow, went up. We tightened, right? I like Varget because it's supposed to be relatively temp stable. This means that in the cold and the heat, you're getting less total velocity change, which means you maintain consistent flight, consistent drop, consistent windage. So the only factor that you're really responding to is the wind itself, instead of the temperature, barometric pressure, etc. And since we're only shooting out 500 yards, it's not that hard to keep the velocities within a range that keeps your drop data the same. Now you can true your ballistic pressures and your ballistic coefficient and your velocities and everything to temperature, and that will give you a much more accurate rifle. I didn't do that with the load I developed for this competition. Instead, I developed the load the month prior and ensured that I adjusted my data for the temperature and situation so that it adapted appropriately. If you use the Hornady website, you will get, or the Hornady app, in FordOff, it will give you the ability to change, FordOff will give you the ability to change your temperature and therefore your velocities automatically, which is very helpful rather than having to learn it. But the coefficient that they give you is a general rule. It will change from rifle to rifle, from projectile to projectile. These are just general testing. Usually they're doing something like 308 or whatever they think is going to be the core focus of that powder. They might test it in a few different loads, but ultimately those temperature tests come from specific places giving you a general guideline. So 0.16 variability in velocity is not that bad for our target, but we probably have more than what's advertised. So either way, per degree, we're not gaining very much in velocity or losing it. Also, the core of the competition is going to be in relatively hot weather, which means that we're going to gain some ballistic advantages. Higher temperatures mean thinner air. It does mean higher humidity, typically. We had like 30%, which was high for where we were at. 30% humidity will slow your projectile, cause greater negative effects on your ballistics. But it also speeds up your powder, so it kind of compensates for it. As opposed to in the cold air, you might have drier air, but you're also going to have slower projectiles. So in my case, that was a nuisance because the first match I did for centerfire, I brought a 223 rifle because it's what I had ready. And I was using M193, which is super temperature responsive. Those 55 grains are being propelled by a spherical powder that doesn't like temperature variation. And so I was getting, my zero was supposed to be about 270 yards, and I was getting about a 330 zero, which was putting me high when I got out to 400 plus yards. So I could hit a target under 250 easily, even with those variations, but by the time you start getting out further, it starts to show up. So I like temp stability anywhere I can take it. The problem with these, the more temp stable, usually it's from longer grains, but the more temp stable, they tend to be high pressure in the chamber, which means that you don't get to use the long barrel as well, which is okay if you're running it in a short barreled rifle, but you don't get the long burn off. And so you need a longer and longer barrel to take advantage of it. And you get higher chamber pressures, which means you are limited on total velocity earlier on. That is irritating, to say the least, when you are trying to get fast bullets, because fast bullets fly straighter. At least that's how I think it works. It flattens your curve and not in the 2020 sort of way. Keeps your drop down, fights the wind better because you're spending less time with that 5 mile an hour wind. Crosswind is now no longer imparting the same amount of time exposed. So you're getting a ballistic advantage by being faster. But you can only go so fast before you overpressure your chamber. So we're trying to stay in safe pressure zones because I'm not going to burn my barrel out. Try to have the fastest projectile. And that doesn't necessarily provide good enough accuracy either. So we have a range of accuracy, but we really only need like 1.5 MOA, which is easy. I am not seeking the most accurate. I'm seeking the most or the least responsive to the environmentals, so that the only factor I have to worry about is drop, or at least the one the most I have to worry about. I can't eliminate wind entirely, but we'll see how we do. Now, why would I get 6 arc instead of 6.5 for this competition? Well, one, I'm not shooting 1,000 yards, so maintaining energy on target is kind of irrelevant. I'm not shooting at an animal, I'm shooting at a target. That right off there is basically gaming it, right? Gaming it is kind of part of this competition to an extent. You can bring the stuff that you hunt with, but if you want to win, you're going to need a little bit of equipment advantages. You know, you're not hunting with your there's simple things like you're not hunting with your blade tips on the arrows. You're using field points or target points because they don't want to damage and destroy targets and leave blades in there, nor add cost unnecessarily. So right there's some gameisms that are going to show up. But they do want it to focus on training you for your hunt. So if you do want to use it just to hunt, then you can develop your hunting loadout and achieve very much the same. But I will be gaming it to an extent. I'm going to stick to the spirit of the game in that I am not going to go full gamer mode and just bring competition styled stuff. Things are going to focus around a hunting type weapon. But why would I use 6 arc? Well, first off, 6mm puts you in the varmint category. I would totally use it to shoot a deer. I don't see the real problem with it in shorter ranges. But it's definitely a varmint cartridge, which I would have no problem shooting at a varmint out to 500 if I have the capacity to hit that target effectively, depending on the target. But the other thing is I kind of see the rifle as really training for a more combat effective use case where you're going out, making contact, identifying a target, and eliminating it before it has the chance to identify you. This is not necessarily sniping, it's more taking out intended known enemy. It's a much better training environment to me than 3-gun or something like that. It's more realistic to how you fight in a field environment, in an open field environment, especially in something like Lisco. So as an individual rifle skill set, hunters are going to have an inherent advantage to a lot of the basic skills needed to function in a patrolling environment. The team actions are the things that they lack, but we're talking about individual skill sets. So again, back to why I would use 6 arc over 6.5. Well, first off, ballistically, I get the same results with a smaller cartridge that's lighter. I'm going to be out there for 8 hours. So I carry the rifle the whole way. Oh, it's heavy. No, it's not, right? A 13-pound rifle is not heavy. It sounds heavy, and it sure is exhausting if you aren't used to carrying that weight, but you should get used to carrying heavy weight, right? But you also should save some weight. It allows me to position the rifle quickly onto targets, and I can maintain visual on targets due to lower recoil. This will allow me for faster follow-up shots accurately, which I find to be important here because once you start missing past a certain threshold, on the first shot, it's 1 shot miss and you're already at 10 points, and then you just have to hit it to be able to move on, or else you can't hit the next target. So the faster you can shoot it again, the better, because you can unload as many rounds as you want in that time frame. So you just don't want to end up like the Trump assassin and just firing rounds willy-nilly and missing because he panicked, right? I use that as an example because it works in terms of marksmanship skill set. Don't just dump rounds if you have an intended goal. Your unintended, theoretically unintended consequences are other people in the crowd injured. I would assume that he wouldn't have a problem with that. He's a bad person. deserves to have his face where it is. But what it'll allow me to do is fire around, identify the error in flight, and make a correction while staying on site the whole time. Its flight speed is higher, while its ballistic coefficient with these 90 grains is a little bit lower, making it average out to about the same at 500 yards. I'm getting about 1.5 minutes less drop and 1/3 minute less windage. So that is going to, with a 5 mile an hour example, that is going to be a positive in the overall game. So I do want to take that slight advantage there as well. It's also going to cost less to reload overall. Starting out, not so great, but these projectiles are 40 cents a piece. And I was able to get the 90 grains for 30 cents a piece, 32. The powder is going to be almost half. It's like I guess it's 2/3-ish, depending on what I'm using. Benchmark is cheaper than Varget, which is going to work best in it so far, from what I've seen, especially for developing that velocity. And yeah, so now semi-automatic is going to allow me to follow up shots better, faster, you know. So again, back to that, getting on target, staying on target, hitting it, moving on. That's one thing that I really would like to see, because I'm not the greatest and fastest at bolt actions. I can certainly shoot them quickly, but you give up some serious accuracy for that speed. The other problem is when you're racking that bolt, you come off target, and now the gun's doing that itself, and so I only have to worry about staying on target. It's one less action, one less thing to fight. Malfunctions are another problem, but that's part of the development, is to get it reliable enough to where that doesn't happen too much. And if you think a bolt action is really reliable, you should see the malfunctions that I experienced on the range, where I was trying to get the bolt and it wouldn't go down, tried to slap it down, it didn't go down, pull it back, drop the mag, and then the round comes out and then I shove a new one in. It's super frustrating. That happens from time to time, even with bolt actions. They get stuck. Magazines are still an inhibiting factor, especially detachable box magazines, right? You can make a reliable bolt action, but how reliable is the question? Ooh, that was a lot. Heavy-handed. So my goal is really to focus on getting rid of, eliminating as many variables as possible to making myself more effective on the target, more effective on the range, and to train through bad habits or to develop good habits that I can rely on and not have to fight the equipment. Now, my 6.5 is completely capable, and most people that are competing it are shooting a bolt action rifle, and almost all of them are in 6.5 because it's extremely popular. It defeats wind very well. It is superior in flight ballistics to .308, and in many cases, it's superior in terminal, depending on how far out you're shooting and what you're shooting, right? When compared on a flat comparison basis, like same projectile type, you know, same powders, you'll get better results with a 6.5 in most other cases. Closer range, .308 is going to maintain more energy on target. Further down range, your accuracy drops off, and you have to fight the projectile more to get more. So again, eliminating those factors. So why am I going to do 6 arc? Same thing. Just little more steps towards those advantages. I could do 6 Creedmoor, you know, it's just this neck down even more. Get it going even faster, get it going faster than the 6 arc. So cook it at like 3,100 feet per second, and have a really flat trajectory. But that also means getting into a whole bunch of stuff that I don't have, and I have a 6 arc. So, simpler answer. I could rebarrel my 6.5, but I would end up with basically another rifle, a whole other collection of things, right? So it's not worth it to me to jump into that slight change for the slight advantage when 6 arc kind of puts it in the middle ground. And it also gives me those other advantages I talked about, lower recoil, staying on target better. So I'm hoping that 6 arc will beat this 6.5, but for now we're going to build up this 6.5 so that we can rely on it anyways, because I also still just own it and want it to do well. I haven't really ever found a load that I loved. So Not that I'm going to find the best load. I don't need this to be a 1 mile gun. I would like a 1,000-yard gun out of a bolt action that I've built out and worked on. And I would like it to be effective for this. So I'm going to use it in this competition throughout the year on the club competitions. I'm going to use it in PRS competitions. But eventually, I will be switching over, hopefully, assuming testing goes well the rest of the way, to 6 arc. But I'm not going to count my horses before they hatch, you know, however that phrase goes. I'm going to rely on old reliable. There's some changes I need to make. I want to get a different bipod for my 6.5. I think the MDT will be a good change. The MDT Cross or something, Crux, I forgot what it's called. Because you can pull it down to refine its placement rather than have it eject out. And that keeps you from having to fight it back up. You can just do it individually. You might think auto ejection is advantageous, but I don't find it to be as much as you think. I think it makes sense if you're trying to get down into a fighting position really fast. But I don't think it's really good if you're trying to get on multiple targets in rough terrain. So it kind of just depends. The other thing is the Harris bipods, especially the ones that attach to those. The Harris bipods attached to those, what are they called? That attach to the swivel studs. They do not respond very well to uneven terrain. When you try to set the bipod, set it down with the bipod folded, the bipod forks are like this. But then there's this big knuckle of what it's attached to with a little knob and everything. And almost all the Harrises are like that. I have a Harris style bipod on my AR-10 that is spring-loaded and everything, but it lands flush on the mounting points except for the fold downs that hold the legs. That one does much better. I could go to something like that, but I don't really want to. I want to do these MDTs because I've seen a couple people run them, and I think they provide a nicer platform for this. It's also a little lighter. It's polymer with a steel leg. So instead of hollow steel everything, it kind of averages out to something that's a little lighter, a little bit more manageable for what I'm doing. So these slight changes are going to, I don't think make me a better shooter per se. They're going to give me a slight advantage over my current setup. I'm setting the case overall length to 2 and what is this? 2.81. 2.81. We're almost there. Let's keep tweaking it down. And hopefully this is going to be, ooh, that's perfect. This is going to be sweet to run for good test fly. I'll load the 6 arc later. I'm not going to go shooting right away. I'm going to set up these 20. I'll continue making shorts. I'll also start making some combined videos where I review my processes and how I got there and equipment. So I'll make like videos on just a certain weapon, just a certain like caliber or cartridge. And yeah. Video editing's hard, is what I've learned from this too, is that it takes a lot of time, which I don't give myself much of because I spend all of it doing things like this. It would be easier, especially for a 500-yard competition, to just be able to buy a cartridge and run that, but how well could I trust it? It's not that they aren't reliable from the factory, or not even that they're not accurate. It's that I don't know their temp stability or anything. And to be fair, I don't know everything about how this will work. What I do know is that I like what I've picked. So this will give me the batch freedom to run these well. And maybe, with like 6 arc, I might just buy a factory load if there are enough offerings to get me what I want, which is a 90 grain traveling at, out of a 20-inch barrel, 29 900 feet per second, which is going to be unlikely since a lot of them don't want to push the velocities that high, not because it's dangerous, but because they get to save on powder over the thousands of rounds, and they get to be a little safer on the overall side of accuracy. Slower projectiles, you know, you can go fast or slow, but slower projectiles are typically easier to set up in a group. If a gun doesn't like a certain projectile, overpressuring it or running it at higher pressures doesn't make it better. So a lot of match rounds are also run a little lighter than they can fly. So yeah, but these are looking pretty good. This is not the prettiest brass out there, but it's, so I didn't clean the crap out of it, but these are looking fine. I do like the projectile. Shiny. We're getting pretty good looks here. I think that this is going to be a good setup. So hopefully we like where we go with this. I'll post the groups on the page, and then I will test velocity maybe later, maybe at the same time, but I'll get you guys some answers on how this is performing, and let you know what I think. I think that my prediction is these will be very good. I already had reasonable success with the 90 grain or the 140 grain hollow point boat tail match tips, right? But the barns were not as consistent as I would like. The weights, the tips, and all that, I was cleaning them a lot to get them ready. And cleaning them and measuring them, I found that I was going through some wasted time and wasted effort. And these, I tested batches of these by weight and found they were a little more consistent. By length, they were much more consistent, almost like within, you know, 10,000ths of an inch accuracy. And they look nice. So I think Hornady definitely is one up from Barnes by a fair amount. They're not exactly the most expensive, but they're also not the cheapest. So, but coincidentally, the ELDMs are priced the same at Cabela's as Barnes. So like, why buy the Barnes if you get Barnes hollow point boat tail match if you can get ELDMs at the same price? The only reason is if your gun just happens to like them more. And I think that's one of the things with these match rounds is that they stay in business because people find that their gun favors something and they just like it. So I have 20 rounds of this. So, and I've drank almost no beer. So thank you for watching. Wish me luck. Like, share, and subscribe. I realize that reloading is a dull video, but it's my talking time. Where I just get to ramble. And I like one takes rather than sitting there and editing these videos, which still haven't even edited one full video yet. I've done everything in a one take right now. So the ones I have on the cooker, they're going okay, but I don't like editing. So this is my format right now. But I'll be bringing shorts because I do like shorts because those are easy to edit and they're fun. But I'll have the rest of the competition in there for you guys. And you will follow me along this year to championship success. So we're going to make that in everything. Thanks. Like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more.